Because conviction, shame ties us to our past. Conviction launches us into our future. Let's dive in. We are going to start tonight with a story. And some of you may have heard this story. I haven't told it in a while, but it is the story of the fox woman. We are on path 8, and we are dealing with the divine feminine, or encountering divine femininity. We're going to talk about what that means. This was the hardest chapter of the book to write. I went through a ton with the publisher to be able to get this wording right, to be able to engage with this reality of what does it mean? What is the divine feminine? What does it mean to encounter divine femininity? And I'm going to jump into all of that. We're going to make it practical and theological, but we have to start with the story of the fox woman. I wish I had a little drum, but it just never works, honestly. Drums only work in person, because trying to mic up a whole little drum thing here in my garage is just not going to work out. So here's the story of the hunter and the fox woman. And it begins like every other fairy tale. Men, how do fairy tales begin? All fairy tales begin with what? Once upon a time. That's it. Once upon a time, there was a hunter who lived out in the wilderness. He lived in a little hunter's cottage. It was nothing fancy. It was nothing sexy. He lived the way he wanted to live. He lived on the land. He would go out every single day. He would hunt. He would trap. He would catch. He would pick berries. He would do all that was necessary to live off of the land in the midst of the land. But one day, the hunter came back from hunting and gathering, and to his surprise, when he looked at his hunter's cottage, there was a little trail of smoke coming up from the fireplace, which was not there when he left, which was a sign that someone was in his cottage. So he runs towards the cottage, throws open the door, and what does he find? He finds sitting there a full cooked meal on the stove and the scent of a woman in the air. That's what the story tells us. That there was a full cooked meal on the stove and the scent of a woman in the air. In fact, they say truly that he could feel the presence of a woman still lingering in that place. Well, of course, he ate the meal with deep gratefulness in his heart. He wandered around looking, did she leave anything else? Is she still here? But to his great demise, he did not find anything but the food and the scent and the presence. He goes to bed that night, gets up really excited. What a great surprise. He didn't know if it was ever going to happen again, but oh, what a glorious day. He gets up in the morning, heads back out into the wilderness, goes hunting, goes gathering. He comes back from a long day of hunting and gathering and doesn't find anything that day. There's nothing to trap. There's nothing in the hunt. There's nothing at the end of his bow. There's nothing at the end of his arrow. There's nothing at the end of his hook. He finds nothing, but again today, to his surprise, as he comes through the clearing and he sees his cottage, his hunter's cottage, what does he see coming up from the chimney that day? 2 days in a row, he sees the chimney with a little bit of smoke coming out of it. He runs to the cottage, throws open the cottage door, and no woman. But again, the place is immaculate. The dinner is set out for him. And again, the scent of the woman lingers in the air, and her presence is thick in that place. It was as if she spent the whole day knowing that he would be away, preparing for him to return. Isn't that like a sweet line? Wouldn't that be that's like what we're all looking for as men, right? Like when it comes to our wives, spending all day preparing for him to return. He goes to bed tonight after his full meal, and after he cleans up a little bit, he goes to bed a little sadder today. Yesterday he was sad. He was like, oh God, what a bummer, she's not here. Today it's like a grief has settled into him, but he has an idea. If it happened one day, and then it happened again a second day, guess what he's hoping? That it would happen again a third day. So he goes out hunting, and he does what any smart man would do after the first day and the second day, missing the woman. What does he do? He comes home early. He says, forget hunting, forget gathering, forget fishing. I'm trying to catch this woman, not just a prize. So he runs home, throws open the door. The chimney smoke is already there. But when he throws open the door this time, he sees standing in his cottage the most beautiful figure he has ever seen. He's stunned. He is love at first sight. He beholds the woman of his dreams standing there over the stove, preparing the house. Her presence takes up every ounce of oxygen in that room. They say truly that she shined like the moon herself, La Luna herself. It was as if the moon had fallen into his cottage and he was in awe of what stood before him. And he walks towards her gently, just stepping one little step at a time, and gets right up to her. And she says these words, "I will be yours if you will have me. But there is one cost that I ask. Can I leave my pelt on the back of the door?" Now, what he didn't realize in that space is that she wasn't just a woman. She wasn't just divine, but she was also a fox. And I don't mean just like hot, like as a fox, like an actual fox. And I think that's what's so interesting. Sometimes we forget that the women that we marry, we end up trying to track them and catch them. And once we catch them, we don't know what to do with them. And we forget that they're still a wild animal inside the women we marry. And our job is not to tame them. Our job is not to calm them down. Our job is not to cage them. It is simply to appreciate the wildness of a woman's soul. And he says, yeah, your pelt. Yes, absolutely. On the back of the door, on the inside, not a problem. Yes. And they sit down and have this meal together. And as they speak deep into the night, they fall madly and insanely in love. And on that first night, they slept together in the old way, and the two became one. The next morning, the hunter gets up, kisses his beautiful new bride. In this case, his new beautiful, this being, this creature, kisses her goodbye and says, "I'll see you when I get back." He goes hunting, and now this goes on for about, let's say 3 to 4 to 5, maybe 6 months, maybe. And it's good. They have a good rhythm going. They have a good relationship happening. But then, guys, something happens. If you've ever been hunting and you get a fox pelt and you put it out to dry, there is something that happens pretty quickly, which is it begins to smell. And now the hunter is not sad. He's not upset at all, not frustrated at all. But there is a scent in his cottage that wasn't there before. And he liked it when it first started. But now we're about 6 months in and it doesn't quite smell as good, you know? So they're sitting down at dinner one night about 6 months in, and he's like, "Hey, listen, honey, love you, grateful for you, all of this, amazing, wonderful, so blessed to have you in my life. But the pelt, it's starting to smell a little bit, and it's kind of filling the house. Do you mind if we just like set it outside?" And she looked at him sternly and said, "You promised me it would be okay." I wonder how many times our wives have asked us the same exact thing, but we just couldn't hear it. "You promised me it would be okay." And he goes, "Yeah, you know what? It's not that bad. You're right. It's not bad. We're only 6 months in." But 6 months turns into 8 months, turns into 10 months, turns into 12 months, turns into 14 months, turns into 18 months. They've been doing this a year and a half, and the pelt does not just smell any longer. It has become pungent. It fills the air. Have you ever been around such a stank room that it feels like it's getting in your pores and in your mouth? It feels like you can taste the scent of the pelt in the house, and it's driving the hunter insane. So he stays at work a little longer because he doesn't want to go home to it. Sound familiar? He goes out and does things with his buddies because he doesn't want to rush home because the pelt, it just is smell. It's taking up all his space. The space that once was his is now taken over by this odor. And he gets home and he's in the stink. They're trying to have dinner. And finally he loses it. He pounds on the table and he says, "The pelt must go." Well, she heard him that time. She heard him. She didn't want to, but she heard him. And she says, "Okay." The next morning, as the man awoke, the smell was gone. The pelt was gone. And the woman who was a fox was gone. And they say truly that to this day, there is still a hunter standing in the doorway of his cottage, lonely in his whole being, longing for the scent of the pelt of the foxwoman. What part of the story stands out to you? Where are you in the story? I want you just to feed the story a little bit. Tell me what part of the story you're in. What part of the story, as you're hearing it, where are you? And you can just raise your hand or just unmute. We promised, we said, and we did not fulfill our end of the bargain. Now, you can let that go one of two directions in your story right now, which you guys have heard me say a ton. You can either go into shame and guilt, which is totally unhelpful, completely and utterly unhelpful. Shame and guilt just has no motivating factor to it. All it's going to do is tear you apart, right? So shame and guilt is the opposite direction. But there is something that's powerful when you hear something like that, which is conviction. Because conviction, shame ties us to our past. Conviction launches us into our future. Both require that we fully understand what we've done, fully accept with authenticity and honesty. I made a promise. And there's 1,000 ways that story can go. So, I'm not just talking in marriage, but all over our lives. There's people in our lives who are saying, "You promised me. You promised through your actions, through your words, through what you said, through what you did. You promised." And I can go into shame and guilt, or I can go, a lot of men, they end up doing the same thing. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Sorry means nothing. It literally doesn't mean anything without the lifestyle to back it up. Because if it's coming, what our spouses are saying is, you're operating from shame and guilt, which is why you're sorry, but you won't change. Shame and guilt causes you to say sorry. Conviction causes you to change. That's the difference between repentance. There's this whole thing about repentance is turning around and walking the opposite direction. That is the stupidest definition of anything I've ever heard. I walked this way and I ended up in trouble. So I'm going to turn the opposite way and walk right back down the same road? What kind of stupid ass thing is that? That's not helpful. Repentance isn't turning around and walking backwards. It's finding a new direction, setting a new course. That's what repentance is. Repentance says, stop moving until you figure out which direction is right. Repentance says, stop moving. Now find a direction. Now you can move forward. But this is the blessing, and you guys know we end every single meeting like this. Joseph, thank you for showing up tonight, dude. I'm super proud of you. Thank you for sharing. for being vulnerable and showing up. Every one of you keep showing up with such vulnerability, such authenticity. And I cannot wait to see where those what fruit those seeds begin to bear. So repeat after me. This is the blessing. I am the evidence
I am the evidence
of the strength of my ancestors.
of the
of the
strength of my
strength of my
ancestors.
ancestors.
There are many things
There are many
There are many
things
things
within my lineage
within my
within my
lineage
lineage
that attempted to obliterate
that attempted to obliterate
all forms of goodness.
all
all
forms of
forms of
goodness.
goodness.
But I
But I
I
am the living proof
am the
And the living
living
proof
proof
that it did not work.
that it did
that
not
it
work.
did not work.
I'm so proud of you guys, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I will see you guys on the daily drives, and I will see you in the community. Later, guys.